All right, welcome to the Explainer. If you're in a sports management program, listen up, because this one's for you. We're about to break down what is maybe the single most important Supreme Court case you need to know, Brown v. Pro Football. Seriously, this decision is the foundation for how leagues, teams, and players all hash things out today. So let's kick things off with a question that on the surface seems like a total no-brainer. When can competitors agree to fix prices? The answer should be never, right? Well, in the kind of weird world of professional sports, where rival teams have to cooperate to even put on a game, the answer gets a whole lot more complicated. Okay, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the fundamental legal clash at the heart of the issue. Then, we'll get into the specific NFL plan that blew everything up. We'll follow the players' lawsuit as it climbed the legal ladder and, of course, break down the Supreme Court's final decision. And most importantly, we'll tie it all together to show you why this case is so critical for a career in sports. At its heart, this entire case is basically a clash of the titans. It's a legal heavyweight match between two massive, powerful areas of American law. So, on one side, you've got antitrust law, specifically the Sherman Act. It's designed to promote competition. It basically says businesses that are competing against each other can't get together behind closed doors and agree to rig the game. But then, on the other side, you've got labor law, and it says, whoa, hold on a second. Employers are actually required to team up and bargain as a group with the union over things like wages and hours. So one law says compete, and the other says cooperate. You can see the problem, right? So how do you solve this? Well, the courts came up with a creative solution. It's called the non-statutory labor exemption. Now that sounds complicated, but just think of it as a legal shield. It protects agreements that are part of the collective bargaining process from getting hit with antitrust lawsuits. It's a way to let the labor negotiation system work without being blown up by antitrust claims. So how did this pretty abstract legal idea end up in a massive real-world fight? Well, it all came to a head when the NFL and the players' union hit a complete wall. Picture this. It's 1987, and the main contract between the NFL and its players expires. For the next 2 years, they're talking, but they're getting absolutely nowhere. Then, in 1989, things grind to a halt over a new idea for developmental squads. The talks reach what's legally called an impasse, a dead end. So the NFL owners decide, fine, if we can't agree, we're just going to do it our way. And here's the plan that caused all the trouble. The owners declared that for these developmental players, there'd be no haggling, no individual negotiations, just one flat, fixed salary for every single one of them on every single team. And that number? A flat $1,000 a week. That was it. It didn't matter if you were a potential star or just barely made the cut. You got $1,000. As you can probably guess, the players' union, which wanted players to be able to negotiate for more based on their talent, was not having any of it. So yeah, the players didn't just write an angry letter. They went to court. And this kicked off a legal battle that would go all the way to the Supreme Court. And their argument was, pretty straightforward and powerful. They said, look, the 32 NFL teams are supposed to be competing businesses. By all agreeing on one fixed salary, they're acting like an illegal cartel to artificially hold our wages down. That, they argued, is a classic textbook violation of antitrust law. So, what was the NFL's comeback? Well, they pulled out that legal shield we talked about earlier. Their whole defense was built on the non-statutory labor exemption. They basically said, hey, this wasn't some backroom price-fixing scheme. This was our last best offer in a negotiation that hit a dead end. It's still part of the bargaining process, so it should be protected. And man, this case bounced around the courts like a fumble on the 1-yard line. First, the players scored big, a $30 million judgment in their favor. But then, the next court up, the Court of Appeals, completely flipped the script and sided with the owners. With the lower courts at a total impasse themselves, it was up to the Supreme Court to be the final referee. So this was it, the final showdown. What did the highest court in the land have to say? This was the moment that would really define labor relations in pro sports for decades to come. And the decision, wow, it wasn't even a nail-biter. It was an 8-1 blowout. A massive, decisive victory for the NFL owners. Okay, so let's get into the why. Justice Breyer, who wrote the majority opinion, basically said that that legal shield, the labor exemption, doesn't just vanish the second negotiations get tough. He argued that when employers act together to implement their last offer after talks have stalled, that action is still a legitimate part of the overall bargaining process, and it's still protected. And they didn't just stop there. The court laid out a really specific set of rules, kind of like a checklist, for when this exemption can be used. It's not a free-for-all. The key thing is that whatever the owners do together has to be super closely tied to the bargaining process. It has to be about a required subject like wages, and it can only involve the two parties in the fight, the league and the union. Okay, so let's talk about the fallout. Why is this case such a big deal that we're still talking about it today? Because honestly, its impact completely reshaped the power structure in all of professional sports. You really had two clashing views here. The majority was all about protecting the labor negotiation system. They were afraid that if you let antitrust judges start second-guessing labor disputes, it would just create total chaos. But then you have Justice Stevens, the lone voice of dissent, who had a totally different take. He basically said, wait a minute, this whole exemption was created to protect workers, not to give owners a legal weapon to team up and drive down salaries. And this, right here, this is the slide. For anyone going into sports management, this is the so what. This ruling is the legal bedrock that allows a league, the NFL, the NBA, you name it, to act as one single powerful unit during a labor fight. It's what gives legal cover to things like salary caps, rookie wage scales, and even the player draft. It essentially tells the players' union that their fight has to be at the bargaining table, not in an antitrust courtroom. Which leaves us with the big question that agents, lawyers, and players are still arguing about today. In trying to protect the collective bargaining process, did the Supreme Court end up giving the owners way too much leverage? That's the debate this case leaves us with, and something for you to think about. Thanks for tuning in.